Hello everyone, welcome to Future Ready. Today it is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. Hope you're getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'll be hanging out with family and some friends and trying not to eat too much, as I'm sure most people will. But lots of interesting stories to get to before the holidays begin. If this is your first time tuning in, the whole point of this podcast is to help dissect some of the trends, the signals that are out there to help you cut through the noise to figure out what you should be doing today to become future ready. 6 stories I'm going to get to today. Story number 1, on-site workers have worse Sunday scaries. Yes, that's right. I said Sunday scaries. Story number 2, the U.S. economy is now dependent on AI spending. Story number 3, Slack's co-founder says workers are drowning in fake work. Story number 4, Amazon's layoffs tied directly to automation. Story number 5, the future office is being redesigned. And story number 6, it's a little bit of an older story, but I just came across it after hearing about it from a podcast guest. Moderna merges tech and HR. So lots of interesting things to get to today. 2 things I want to mention as usual. The first, of course, my brand new book available for pre-order. It's called The 8 Laws of Employee Experience: How to Build a Future-Ready Organization. If you like the content that you hear on this podcast, that's exactly what the book is about. It is this type of content, talking about the future of work, talking about employee experience, how the world of work is changing, and looking at where things are going over the next 5 to 10 years. I talked to over 100 chief human resource officers for that book, and it's got a lot of really cool frameworks and models and all sorts of stuff like that I think you're going to want to take a look at. Second thing I want to mention, if you are a chief human resource officer, I highly encourage you to check out Future of Work Leaders. It is a exclusive CHRO group that I started, and we have around 40 CHROs in there. Our next meeting is going to be with the head of McKinsey's global CEO practice. We're talking about why CHROs are CEO whisperers. That's going to be on December 5th. In January, we have the CTO of Uber who's going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about their AI strategy and what CHROs can be learning from that. So again, you can go to Future of Work Leaders to learn more, and you can apply to join there. Okay, let's jump right into story number 1. Even reading this story sounds ridiculous. On-site workers have more Sunday scaries than remote workers. This sounds like something I would be saying to my 5-year-old and my 9-year-old, but no, this is for full-grown adult people with jobs. Fast Company reports that on-site workers are experiencing significantly higher levels of Sunday scaries compared to remote employees. The study highlights commute dread, rigid schedules, reduced autonomy, and more direct oversight as major contributors. Remote workers who maintain more control over when and how they start their week report substantially fewer symptoms of anticipatory anxiety. This psychological gap is widening just as more companies intensify return to office requirements. So basically, you're telling me that if I have to get dressed and leave my house, I'm going to feel a little bit more stressed and anxious, as opposed to if I get to stay in my house and do whatever I want in my PJs. Got it. This should not be surprising. Obviously, if you are going to show up to an office on a certain day and you have to get dressed, you have to commute, you have to see people, you have to be on better behavior, you have to engage with people, you have to see some people maybe that you like or you don't like, yes, you will feel a little bit more stressed and a little bit more anxious. Welcome to being a human being. Am I going to feel more stressed out if I'm doing a virtual talk or if I'm doing an in-person talk? Obviously, if I'm doing an in-person talk, if I'm just staring at a camera or a light and I can't see 1,000 people in a room and I don't see body language and I'm just talking to myself and my dogs are next to me and I'm, in sweatpants, yeah, I'm not going to feel that stressed. If I got to get on a plane and travel and do all that sort of stuff that goes along with giving a talk, it's going to be more stressful. So I'm sorry, this to me is not shocking. The fact that we're even talking about this is kind of ridiculous. And I think that a lot of organizations should, we shouldn't give too much credence. We shouldn't give too much attention to this, because the whole idea, the concept of Sunday scaries for me is kind of a little bit childish, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I mean, this is not surprising. The fact that this was a story in Fast Company alone is kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, story number 2, how the U.S. economy became dependent on AI spending. Wall Street Journal reports that U.S. GDP growth is increasingly tied to corporate AI spending, from GPUs and chips to massive data center buildouts. I think Amazon even today announced they're going to be doing $50 billion more for government data centers. These investments are happening, though the productivity gains have not yet fully arrived. Companies are spending not because AI has transformed their operations, but because they fear falling behind. It's reminiscent of the early cloud era, investment first, justification later. David Sachs, who I'm a fan of, he is our crypto and our AI tsar. He said on X a couple of days ago, and I responded to him, he said, according to the Wall Street Journal, AI-related investment accounts for half of GDP growth, which is wild. A reversal would risk recession. We can't afford to go back. And I responded to that and basically said that I don't think that alone is, a justifiable reason to be making AI investments just because it's 50% or half of GDP growth. I said we still need to see a return on AI, which I'm confident we will get, but for most organizations, it's not there yet. And first, we have to very heavily invested in AI spending. So much so, half of GDP growth in the United States, massive number, whether it's data centers, whether it's chips, whether it's companies investing in each other. There's trillions of dollars being poured into this. So the futurist lens here, we're entering an AI-dependent economy where corporate spending on AI has become a macroeconomic stabilizer. This creates, I think, several challenges that we need to be paying attention to. Number one, the productivity gap, because right now spending is way far ahead of ROI. And if the gap doesn't close, we're going to be in major problems. Thankfully, NVIDIA, every time they announce quarterly results, they're beating those results. What do you think is going to happen to the market when one day, which will happen, NVIDIA is going to say, we sold fewer chips than we thought, or demand is lower than we thought, because that day is coming. And when it does, people are going to lose their marbles. So the second is the energy gap. AI data centers will require 37 gigawatts of new power by 2030. And the workforce gap, so the electricity gap, I think, is there, which is why we're building data centers, why companies are talking about nuclear, why they're talking about coal, why they're talking about energy, and making these investments. And there have been some rumors that if you live next to one of these areas or next to one of these companies, your electricity costs are going up a little bit too. And there's also a workforce gap, where the World Economic Forum estimates 44% of workers' skills will be disrupted within 5 years. So I think the companies betting very heavily on AI won't struggle with the tools. They're going to struggle with the human capability needed to use them. And so leaders do have to prepare for volatility, for hype cycles, which we go through all the time, and talent shortages as well. But it's interesting that we're so dependent on AI spending that it's accounting for such a large percentage of our GDP growth. Story number 3, Slack's co-founder says employees are drowning in fake work. Fake work. If you're watching the video version of this, I'm doing my air quotes. Fortune reports that Slack co-founder Stuart Butterfield believes employees are buried in work like work. Deck building, so PowerPoints, pre-meetings, status updates, and documentation that create the appearance of productivity without advancing outcomes. Butterfield says hybrid environments make this worse because employees feel forced to demonstrate activity. AI is also accelerating the problem by making it easier to generate polished artifacts quickly. So again, the argument there is that if you're not in the office, you're in a virtual environment, you want to make it seem like you're productive. And so how do you make it seem like you're productive? You work on PowerPoint presentations, you work on summaries, you attend the meetings, you create status updates. I had a friend when I used to live in the Bay Area who worked from home. He worked for a big company. And when he would work from home, he would bring his laptop with him in the garage. And I would say, why are you doing that? And he said, well, because my company uses Teams, and every like 15 or so minutes, if I don't wiggle the mouse, it's going to show that I'm offline. So he would literally bring his laptop with him everywhere that he went, in his home, if he's working out or whatnot, anywhere he could get Wi-Fi, just so he could wiggle the mouse every like 15, 20 minutes. And so the appearance of productivity, especially in a hybrid environment, and I agree with Stuart Butterfield on this, is very real. And so the futurist lens here is that this is the dark paradox of AI productivity. The technology that is supposed to make us more efficient is amplifying performative work instead. Microsoft reports meetings are up 252% in 5 years. Asana says 43% of knowledge worker time is spent on communication rather than execution. So we're having meetings about having meetings. We're talking about planning, but we're not actually really doing anything. AI widens the gap between organizations that value outcomes and those that value optics. And leaders who don't aggressively eliminate fake work will choke their organizations with noise. The future belongs to companies that define real work with surgical precision. Not to get political, but I live in the state of California. This to me sounds like what's happening in California. It's a lot of performative work. We talk about things and we meet about doing things, but we don't actually do things and we don't actually drive any results in this state. I agree with what Stuart Butterfield is saying here. I think this will be a real challenge for organizations going forward. Story number 4, Amazon layoffs tied directly to automation and robotics. So there has been a lot in terms of Amazon and their layoffs. I've covered it on this podcast several times. But now Fortune is reporting that Amazon's latest wave of layoffs is tied directly to automation and robotics, not cost cutting. Amazon is deploying new robotic arms, autonomous vehicles, algorithmic scheduling, and AI-powered warehouse optimization. Internal planning documents anticipate more rounds of automation-driven job reductions over the next several years. So I guess Fortune or somebody was able to obtain some leaked documents from Amazon, which clearly show, because when these layoffs first came out, Andy Jassy, the CEO, and other people came out and they were saying, no, it's not about AI, it's about cost cutting, it's about culture. And now it appears that allegedly, they were lying, and it really is about AI and why they're cutting costs. The futurist lens on this, I think this marks the beginning of continuous automation cycles where jobs will gradually disappear instead of disappearing all at once. Amazon already operates, and I believe this number is accurate, more than 750,000 robots. I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 1 million by this point. Oxford Economics forecasts 20 million manufacturing jobs will be eliminated globally by 2030. Again, 20 million manufacturing jobs eliminated by 2030. I've talked to several CHROs on my podcast. One recently was from Western Digital. And she was saying that in some of their factories now, they don't even have to turn the lights on because it's all robots that are doing the assembly and the production, and they're handling all the work that all the robots just operate in the dark. No need to turn on a light because there's no people in there. And so I think those types of manufacturing jobs are indeed going to be in a lot of trouble. The winners of this transition will be companies that treat automation as augmentation. I've talked about this quite a bit. With strong reskilling pipelines and internal mobility structures. The losers are going to be the ones who face brand damage, retention collapse, and regulatory pressure. Amazon, I think, is showing us the real automation pattern of the next decade. Incremental, relentless, and systemic. So as these AI tools get better and better and better in certain areas, you can start to see them creeping in more and more into different types of roles and different types of jobs. And I hate to say it, expect to see more of those layoffs, more of those job transitions taking place. I actually had a podcast today with Aleem Danji. He's the CHRO of TD Synnex. They have around 20-something thousand employees. And he told me that he thought it was rather ironic that we see studies from firms like MIT saying that 95% of companies don't see ROI in terms of generative AI. But then on the flip side, you see all these companies laying off because of AI. So it's sort of like, which one is it? Are we not seeing ROI, or are we seeing ROI and that's why we're seeing layoffs? My thought on that was that I think a lot of these organizations are doing preemptive layoffs. There was certainly some overhiring, I think, during and post-pandemic. And I think a lot of organizations out there, a lot of leaders, they see where this is going and they are anticipating what they will need to do, and therefore they are doing it now. Story number 5. The future office is becoming biophilic, flexible, and climate controlled. Yes, I said biophilic, probably the only time I've ever said that word. This is a Wall Street Journal story. They report that offices are undergoing major redesigns. More natural light, biophilic elements, aka plants, flexible zones, wellness spaces, VR-enabled collaboration, and even personalized climate-controlled devices. Companies are reinventing physical spaces as environments optimized for specific types of high-value work. I talked about this over a decade ago, that there are lots of different ways that you can work. And the idea of having to show up to work and working just one cubicle to do everything is kind of ridiculous. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations create multiple workspace options. Now, I think there's something to be said for that versus going like overboard. I don't know how I feel about personalized climate control devices. We need to make sure we don't cross the line between understanding that this is a place of work and not a science fiction experiment. You're not in Star Trek. This isn't Minority Report. This isn't, you choose your science fiction movie or book. Some of these elements are certainly interesting. I'm a big fan of the natural light, the greenery, the plants, the multiple workspace options. But, let's not get carried away here. So the futurist lens here, I think we're going to see the rise of the performance office. So offices that actually help you become more engaged, more productive, spaces that are designed not just for presence, but actually for purpose. And, I think there's some research out there that shows, employees are more inspired if they work in natural environments. And a lot of employees, I think 70% of them say that they come to the office for collaboration and connection, not just for tasks. So the future office is no longer a requirement. I think it's an experience asset. And that's what I've said for many, many years, even in all my previous books, that the physical space is a manifestation of your values, of what your company stands for. And it's where you go to experience the company, experience the culture. And it is, I think it's an important asset that shouldn't go away and won't go away. And companies that design these spaces as a part of the employee experience stack, I think, are going to win. It's that simple. In my book, The Employee Experience Advantage, I talked about culture, technology, and space as the 3 elements, the 3 things that you can design and control and shape. And so space, still very, very important. Story number 6. This is an older story, but I just came across it today. And I think this was in a previous podcast I did with, I believe it was Rebecca Hines from Glean. We were talking about this, and she said, she told me about the story, and then I looked it up. So this was earlier this year. Wall Street Journal report reveals that Moderna, this is a biotech pharmaceutical company, merged its technology and HR functions under one executive to unify people, systems, workforce analytics, AI access, digital infrastructure, and skills development. The new model aims to accelerate adoption of digital tools and improve organizational responsiveness. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, pretty crazy stuff. I'm a big believer that one of the big transformations that we're seeing in the world of HR is that HR leaders are becoming chief future of work officers. Now, I'm not sure how many of them are going to be comfortable taking on the AI role, but several are. I think at ServiceNow, their chief people officer is also responsible for AI. So she's like chief people and AI enablement officer. At Zapier, Their CHRO is Chief People and like AI Transformation Officer. So I think we're going to see more of a blending, more of an integration of these two roles. It's not for everybody. You do need to have some technical fluency in there, technical capabilities. For example, I mentioned Aleem Danji that I talked to today. He said they have no plans to do that inside their company. They want to keep the AI and the technical roles, the people roles and the technical roles totally separate. But you can expect to see more of these types of things potentially happening inside of organizations. I think what we're seeing with Moderna, the futurist lens out there, I think it's one of the clearest examples of employee experience becoming reality. HR and IT cannot operate in silos anymore. I've said that for over a decade. And in a world where work is digital, where it's distributed, data-driven, these two functions are either going to need to merge or work really, really closely together. PwC reports that 77% of CEOs expect AI to require major organizational redesign. Moderna's move is the blueprint for the future CHRO, or one of the blueprints, again, either merging or working closer together. Someone who's part technologist, part strategist, part behavioral scientist. And the structure will become the norm potentially across a lot of industries and geographies and companies going forward. So we'll see. I'm not going to be surprised to see more of those types of things emerging. But those are the top stories, the top interesting stories of the day. I actually had 13 stories, and I had to narrow it down to 6. So maybe we'll throw some of them in for tomorrow as well. And so I want to leave you with a quote from a CEO. And today I have a couple. Let's leave you one with Elon Musk, a little contrarian, something for you to think about. This was in 2023. He said, "There will come a point where no job is needed. The economy will be fully automated." When will that point come? I don't know, 5, 10 years? We'll see. Something for you to brainstorm and think about. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have, please do me a favor. Help this new daily podcast get discovered. Leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or whatever your preferred channel is. It means a lot to me, and it helps the show get discovered as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will do another episode tomorrow, and then probably not on Thanksgiving, maybe on Friday as well. So have a great rest of the day. I will see you soon.